We've been here soaking in a lot of knowledge for a little bit, so let's just take a quick stand and stretch break. We're gonna do 15 seconds, get some blood moving again. Just like reach up towards the sky. You can stay seated, sit in. Good. There we go. I need right too. Move your back. Get the blood moving again. Awesome. Okay, sit back down. Really quick break. Awesome. Okay. I love this topic. I think it's so fascinating. So David is going to be talking about is hiring based on culture fit, killing workplace diversity. So take it away, David.
Great, and so this is culture is obviously something that's super passionate to me. And when I was on my career vacation traveling around with my family, I also had a lot of time to read after my daughter went down for bedtime. So one of the books that came out at that time in 2012 was Tony Hsieh's Delivering Happiness. So did anyone read that book about his Zappos experience, right? It's awesome. If you've ever done the tour, it's really fantastic. So he talks about being very intentional about culture, right? Like it's like if you moved into a house and you didn't take care of the garden, stuff would still grow, right? That's like a culture. You can either cultivate it and be nice and neat and say like, hey, we want roses, or it's just gonna be weeds. But the culture will happen and it will be organic. So I was very intentional about thinking about, well, what are the cultural values of the next company I wanted to start? And so, doing that, and then it started to kind of creep into the zeitgeist about, hey, is culture fit killing workplace diversity? And intellectually, I'm like, what does this even mean, right? So I had to really start kind of digging down into it for myself and thinking, well, how is that possible? Or, how do I reconcile the two? So, in our values, it's delight, and the first one is D, right? And the D is delight customers, but there's a traditional way if you're delighting customers who are buying something from you. But the other D in delight is also delighting internal customers. Because we really believe that if we can't delight our colleagues and people when we're asking for support or questions, there's no way we can be authentic and delight people externally, right? So when we talk about culture fit and culture a lot when we hire people, so then it made me think, well, are we killing diversity at TINYpulse by doing this? And in my mind, I think that it's the twist is if people are leveraging it in a very negative way to just say, oh, that person's not a great fit because they don't fit our culture. But they could be great at on the aptitude side, and they ding them really hard on the attitude side. And that's something that's very subjective. And you're like, well, what can I do about that, right? And I think that to really think through that is a lot of that comes down to interview training. And well, how do you train for that? How do you ask the right questions to get to that? Because at the end of the day, like delight customers could be anyone's value, and who wouldn't want to work with people who delighted their customers or delighted each other? If I had a question about Lydia about, hey, can you explain to me this data point? And she does it in a nice way, I'm like, well, that's great, because I would treat her the way she would want to be treated and vice versa. So I think it's about how it's used contextually. That's the important part. And a couple of and I alluded to this earlier, like how we think about also facilitating, not just when you hire, but once they're there within the company, is especially when we do brainstorming. So when I was studying in Singapore for a little bit, there was a professor who, this is a long time ago, so they called it electronic brainstorming. So this is before a lot of the tools we have here. And the rules are this. So if you wanted to get ideas on a marketing campaign, a product, a PR campaign, you get people in a room, and then nowadays you use Slack, or Teams, sorry if there are any Microsoft people. So, I know Teams. Okay, so you go in there, and then here are the rules. You time box it, so usually like 10 minutes. And then you say, you can enter any idea you want, let's say about how would we promote this forum. And you cannot judge anyone's idea, and then it's just about, you can build on other people's idea, and it's just about getting it out there. And then you start the clock and you just go. So you don't even know like whose it is. You're just like putting down your ideas, and it's just like vomiting it all out, but there's no bad ideas, you're not judging, and you're building on top of it. And then at the very end, if you're doing it in Teams and Slack, you're able to get the output and then put it on a board and just say like, hey, you know, what do people think about it afterwards? But you get all the idea out, it's very democratized. And then also from a sprint perspective, from a product planning, is when we do meet with other people, we have product ideas, and we'll say, okay, well, everyone gets like 3 dots. You get to put, you know, 3 on 1, 2 on 1, 1 on 1, or 1 on 3. But we always say that the managers always go last, and then usually I always go the very last, because I don't want to unintentionally bias anyone, right? Like I actually want, and I say you have to write down your own on your piece of paper, just go ahead and put it up there, and then we discuss it. And hopefully it's not all the same, because if it was the same, then we wouldn't need to hire these people, because it would just be one person's brain, right? So hopefully there is diversity, and we can talk about what are some of the hidden assumptions that we don't know about. So in summary, I think it's how it's actually used in the hiring process, the screening process, and how it's actually lived in the company itself. And I think that culture obviously is super important, and it's just the context that is more important.